For the last 2 years, each October, I've made a fun Halloween project out of tulle. So, I think we should make a tradition of it and start a similar project this year. We already have a black tulle skeleton and a misty ghost cape, so this year I think I'm in the mood for something with a touch of blood. So, grab something warm to drink, get cozy under a blanket and join me in making this year's Halloween dress. The idea for this year's project came to me when I saw some beautiful red tulle with beads sewn onto it. I was already thinking about potential Halloween projects, and when I saw the fabric I got some ideas right away, as it reminded me of dripping blood. This turned into the main idea for the project, focusing on a look of dripping blood down from the neck, spreading over the shoulders and the front. With this settled, I could then start designing the dress. I went for a light, ghostly look, only weighted down by the beaded fabric around the neck. Even though the inspiration was more messy, I still wanted to achieve a structured look by making the design more symmetrical. The design was quite simple, a flowy, transparent dress with red beads spreading down from the neck. But even though it was simple, I was really looking forward to start on the dress the next day. So now that we've got our design ready, I thought we could talk a little bit about how I plan to tackle this project, maybe break it down in some general steps that we're going to take in order to get the dress done, and maybe give a little bit of an overview how this project and video is going to be organized. So the general idea is to make a clear base from some kind of skin tone tulle that I still have, so that I can later add all the blood onto it. For this I first have to make a mock-up because I don't think I have a pattern that works for this, and I think this time I'm going to drape the mock-up. At least I want to try to do this because of the shape of the lines that I want to achieve. I think that's the best option this time. So step 1 will be draping a mock-up. Then afterwards we can make the clear bodice out of the tulle, like I said. And afterwards I want to add this tulle. Since it has these nice stripes, I think it will work well to just take out some of these and then add them to the sheer bodice to mimic those dripping blood lines. I really want to focus on the top of this project and to make it look as realistic as possible with still making it look like a dress, if that makes sense. I don't think I will have the time to make an extra skirt for it to add to the dress, and so I thought I still have a dress that has the same tulle as the skirt, so I will take the dress apart and just use the tulle skirt for this project so that I can really focus on the bodice. Okay, so the plan for today is to get the bodice draped, get the fit correct, and get the pattern ready so that I can then start on the actual dress tomorrow. Since I didn't have a fitting pattern, I decided to drape the bodice. Draping is a technique I don't often use, as I initially learned to draft my patterns flat, and that habit stuck. Draping patterns always makes me a little nervous, even though I know it feels more intuitive to most people than drawing up a pattern on paper. For this bodice I wanted no visible seams, meaning I had to move all the darts towards the neck. From there they could spread out and later be covered by the red beads. I started with the front of the bodice, getting all the darts loosely in place before making them more precise. I couldn't get the bottom of the bodice smooth without adding an extra dart there, which I'll need to adjust later. After the front was done, I continued on the back, using muslin scraps I had lying around, so it's pieced together but should work fine. This now gives us a base we can refine a little bit more before taking it off. First, I drew over all the lines we'd created with pins, including the center front and all darts. I also marked the parts where fabric pieces overlap, making it easier to recreate when it's off the mannequin. Then I went back and drew on all the extra lines not included in the drape. For this, I used a different color so that nothing would get confusing later. Even though I'd initially decided on sleeves, I changed my mind while draping and prepared the pattern for a small cape instead. Once everything was marked, I could carefully remove the fabric from the mannequin. I then took out all the pins so I could lay the fabric flat on my table. Now that I had the front piece on the table, I also moved the front darts so that the bottom was closed smoothly. I repinned everything carefully, making sure it laid flat, and then cut along all the red lines I'd marked. With all the pieces separated, I grabbed my pattern paper and carefully traced each one. Some lines got a bit wobbly from the pinning, so I smoothed them out by tracing over them with a marker. Then I cut out all the pattern pieces from the fabric, completing the pattern. I decided to skip the mock-up stage and start directly with the tulle bodice. Here I could use my favorite sewing technique. After deciding on how many layers to use, I prepared my ironing mat and cut the tulle slightly larger than each pattern piece. I did this twice for each piece except the center front, which I cut once since it's folded in half. Each tulle piece is carefully pinned onto the mat, with the pattern secured in between, and then it's time for basting. I trace around each pattern piece with basting thread, making sure to add all the markings as well. I know this takes a lot of time and there are probably easier ways to mark a pattern, but I really enjoy slowing down and I think the outcome is worth it since the marked pieces are easier to handle afterwards. I continued basting until each piece was done, then trimmed the excess fabric. Since all the pieces were see-through, I didn't need a set seam allowance and could just trim the fabric to what felt right. With all the tulle pieces cut out and laid on the table, I could start sewing them together. I used a blue thread intending to just baste the pieces together for now and later open them up to layer the red tulle underneath, though I ultimately decided against that. Which wasn't really a problem because the blue thread got covered up in the end. After sewing, I ironed the seams open and trimmed the seam allowance as short as possible. I worked around the whole bodice like this until the tulle top was ready. Here you can already see the cape I decided on instead of the sleeves. Then it was time for the red fabric. Before cutting, I laid out the fabric to check the bead placement. I wanted the lines to be more vibrant, so I decided on sewing 2 rows of beads together instead of using just one. I also checked how the beads were secured to the fabric to determine how to cut it best. After deciding on a method, I measured each seam on the Tulle bodice and cut strips of the beads from the red fabric to match the length. I made sure to pick up all the beads that came loose so I could maybe use them later as well. I wasn't sure yet if I wanted to do something with them, but it always feels like such a waste when they end up in the trash. With the stripes cut out, I slowly worked my way around the bodice where I pinned them in place. I first concentrated on the left side to check if I liked the placement. For the bust part, I wanted to make the bodice less see-through, so I added red tulle in layers that was actually cut from the side of the beaded fabric. To outline this part, I could actually make use of the pattern from the red fabric. I just cut out 2 of the corners and pinned them over the seam in the front. Everything slowly took shape and I really liked the look of it, so I continued to pin the other side in place as well. After getting more pins twice, I finally had the fabric secured and could sew everything in place. For this I used a thin embroidery needle because I tried to secure everything by sewing through the beads once in a while, and a regular needle would get stuck in there. I wasn't too concerned about the thread being visible in some places because it wasn't really noticeable and would even add to the messiness of the red. So I just slowly worked my way around the mannequin, making sure not to sew it to the dress. The back got some beaded fabric draped onto it as well, and after I got around the whole piece once, I added even more fabric just around the top of the neckline. I wanted to make sure to not have any blank spots here, so I layered 2 to 3 strands of beads around it. After sewing them in place as well, I could then put the rest of the red fabric away and focus on the bottom of the dress. As mentioned before, I wanted to use an existing skirt from a previous made dress, so I had to get the dress out and carefully remove the skirt. This is something I do regularly to create new designs. It not only saves time, but I'm also using significantly less fabric, which is something I try to be as mindful about as possible. After sewing away the rest of the dress, I draped the skirt over the bodice to check if the waistlines matched and whether I liked it together. Once this was done, I could then pin both parts and sew them together. This time, however, I switched the blue thread to a matching one. Now I only had to secure the rest of the beaded fabric down the back and add hooks and eyes as the closure. And with that, this year's Halloween project was done. I'm really happy with how the dress turned out. It really was a silly little fun project, not only regarding the sewing but also with the reveal in mind. I'm still learning how to edit my videos, and diving into this more fun editing technique was really cool. As always, there are a few things I would change looking back on the dress now. The biggest thing is probably that I didn't sew a lining layer, and with the dress being so see-through, I had to wear something underneath, which took away significantly from the effect of the dress, I think. I also think that the effect of the beads and the red didn't quite transport through the camera, but I hope the intention of it all did. I hope you liked today's video. If you did, feel free to like it and subscribe to my channel. Thank you for watching, and until next time.